Welcome to the life you crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Leah Pinelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started.
Did you know there are actually 3 different types of overeaters? Knowing your type is the key to stopping. You can take my free What Type of Overeater Are You quiz at leahpinelli.com/quiz to find your type and your solution in under just 5 minutes. Head on over to leahpinelli.com/quiz so that you can solve this problem stat. Hey, happy summer, people. Today on the podcast, I'm going to give you my top 10 tips for eating on vacation. And of course, what I mean by eating is eating well, enjoying your food, not feeling deprived, or needing a bunch of self-control while you're on vacation, but also not gaining a bunch of unwanted weight on vacation, not overdoing it and overindulging and feeling like crap on vacation. We talked about this quite a bit on the last episode 112. Is that right? Yes. I'm sorry. That was not the last episode. The one right before that one, episode 112, increase your summer pleasure factor. We talked about the point of diminishing returns quite a bit on that episode. So if you missed it, go back and check that one out. But today we are going to talk about the point of diminishing returns when it comes to eating really well on vacation and not feeling deprived, but also not gaining that unwanted weight. So let's dive in. Tip number 1, order vegetables. So this was one that I learned by traveling quite a bit to Buffalo, New York over the last 20 years or so. My husband is born and raised Buffalonian, and y'all, they eat different out there than us California girls. I will tell you that. At least in my husband's family, it is pizza and wings, like, I don't know, 4 times a week. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but my family loves pizza and wings in Buffalo, as most Buffalonians do. And by the way, if you haven't had buffalo wings in Buffalo and pizza in Buffalo, you don't know what you're missing. But one of the things that I learned the hard way is that if I don't prioritize ordering any vegetable that's on the menu anywhere we go, I'm probably not going to be eating any vegetables while I'm in Buffalo. So I learned that every single time we would go out to eat, which, by the way, for my family in New York was most meals, every time we would go out to eat, I would scan the menu for any kind of plant. And sometimes, we'd be in like a deli, pizzeria kind of place, like a sub, they have subs out there. It's a really popular thing to eat, these big submarine sandwiches. And it might just be like an iceberg lettuce salad that was on the menu, but I made it my mission to order the vegetables. I might still order pizza or, have the wings. It's not that I wouldn't eat those things. It's just that the veggie was like, it was an automatic. What's the veggie? Leah's ordering it, if there was one. And I strongly recommend that you do the same everywhere you go. So whether you're traveling in Italy or Peru, it doesn't matter. There will be vegetables along the way, and you can choose them and always choose them first. And then you don't have to worry if there are some meals that literally have no plants in them, because you most likely got plants at the last meal. So that's how I like to think about it. So that's my first tip for you. Order the vegetables first. The second tip I have for you is, I kind of combine these two, I guess, into one, but I wrote protein and fat. Prioritize getting plenty of protein and plenty of fat. Now, this isn't too hard when you're traveling typically to get plenty of fat, because often when we travel, we are eating in restaurants, and most restaurants use tons of fat. Why? Because it makes your food taste delicious. And therefore you will keep coming back to that restaurant and purchasing their food. But you also want to make sure that you're getting some protein in there, you guys, because protein in the form of animal protein, such as chicken, beef, pork, if you eat it, shrimp, seafood, fish. And then if you don't eat those animal proteins, maybe you eat eggs or beans or tofu or seitan, whatever it is that you get for protein, make sure that you're getting enough protein when you travel. And the main reason for that is because protein really signals your satiety hormone if your hormones are calibrated. And what I mean by that is many of us who have done a lot of dieting in our lives, myself included, we tend to have what is called metabolic dysfunction, which sounds scary, but really all it means is that hormonally we're all kind of out of whack. There's a hormone called ghrelin that kicks in to tell you that you're hungry, makes your tummy growl. And then there's another hormone called leptin that kicks in to tell you that you're no longer hungry, that you are satisfied. It is possible to be leptin resistant. I certainly was. I wasn't diagnosed as such, but I am sure of it, given the decades of my life that I never really felt satisfied or full until I was absolutely stuffed. That is a sign sometimes of metabolic dysfunction, and I was certainly experiencing it. I fixed it myself, and you can too, by learning the tool that I teach now in my Eating Without Fear video training. It's less than 30 minutes long, and you can get it at leahpinelli.com/EWF. But that one tool will actually teach you how to recalibrate those hormones so that you have your ghrelin and your leptin are firing as they should. And once you have that down, and by the way, you can get that into place just by practicing for a week or two. Those hormones will be recalibrated. There are some other biochemical issues kind of going on there that, is outside of the scope of this particular podcast, but that's definitely the place to start. And then when you're traveling, you just want to be sure that you're getting that protein, because the protein is part of what's going to signal the leptin hormone to come in and say, hey, we've had enough to eat. I know for me, excuse me, I can eat meat sometimes, but then as soon as I introduce the protein, I'm pretty quick to finish the meal because it is kind of the missing piece for a lot of us. So protein and fat. So we got number 1, order vegetables first. Number 2, make sure you're getting plenty of protein and fat while you're traveling. Number 3, I've talked about this on the last few episodes, but this really goes for everyone, which is to avoid fried foods. Now, I'm not saying don't eat fried foods. If that's what I meant to say, that's what I would have said. Okay, so hear me when I tell you that you just want to avoid fried foods. And what I mean by avoid fried foods is you want to limit how many, and I'm talking about deep fried foods that you're eating, particularly not because necessarily even like the issue of weight gain, although most of my listeners don't want to gain a bunch of weight on vacation. And that is one surefire way to do it, by eating a whole bunch of fried foods, obviously. But this more important reason is that in restaurants, particularly chain restaurants, but also just, in your regular mom and pops, fried foods are usually made with vegetable oil. And vegetable oil sounds healthy, but it's actually not healthy at all. And I'm not going to go into all of the details of the problem with these oils. You can learn all about them. My favorite teacher to really understand why these oils are just not great for us, particularly digestively. If you guys know me, you know I'm a little bit obsessed with my digestive system because I've had so much trouble with it over the years, and I finally cracked the code on it. And one of the big irritants, but not just of my digestive system, for many of us, is these vegetable oils that are being used. And Dr. Mark Hyman, which probably quite a few of you know, he's a celebrity doctor out there. He wrote a book called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? Which I'll make sure I add to the show notes. And I just love this book. And he goes into detail, and it's very easily, it's a reference. So it's very easy to find it in the book. But he goes into great detail about why these vegetable oils are so problematic for so many of us. And what can really happen is they zap our energy. We don't feel, because digestively, they are not very easy for us to digest. They are not doing us any favors digestively. And our digestive system is directly linked to our energy levels. So I'm not saying don't eat the fish and chips. I'm not saying, don't enjoy the calamari. I am saying to just be mindful of it if you are prioritizing feeling good on your vacation. And I talked all about that in episode 112, increasing your summer pleasure factor, because really that's the whole point, right? That's all any of us ever really want, is to feel freaking good, to feel vivacious and to feel pleasure and to feel good. That's all we want. And so if that is what you want, which I'm telling you it is, because I'm in your head and I know that's what you want. I'm just kidding. But if that's what you want, then I just recommend that you limit the amount of fried foods you eat. I'll give you a good example. We were in a pub recently and they had this, what were they called? They were called corned beef and cabbage egg rolls, if I remember correctly. And my husband was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's try those. And so he ordered them and they were super deep fried, of course. And of course I wanted to try them because that sounds delicious. And it was, by the way, they were amazing. But I limited myself to one piece, and I did not also order the fish and chips, which also sounded really good to me, which, by the way, I would not eat a whole plate of fish and chips because my digestive system would absolutely revolt. I would probably, split that maybe with my husband and then order something that's more amenable to my happy digestion. But my point there is that it doesn't mean that you don't eat the fried food. It just means that and there were plenty of those egg roll things left over. I could have eaten 4 or 5 of them. I just chose to stick with one, really enjoy that experience, and then let that be enough. Okay. So that is tip number 3, avoiding fried foods. Tip number 4 is to avoid processed foods. And what do I mean by processed foods? I mean foods that come in a bag. I often think of my old roommate in Madrid, Spain, when I lived in Madrid back in 2003 and 2004. Her name was Carmen. Carmen, if you're listening, hola, un besito bien grande. She used to always say, nada en paquete, which means nothing in a package. She shopped like her mother shopped, and which basically meant they didn't buy anything in a package. So she would get her meat straight from the butcher, right? She would get her cheese from the butcher, the deli, wherever they buy cheese. I can't remember. The fromage, I don't know. But she would get her fruits and vegetables from the market, but they were not in packages. She didn't eat cereals. She didn't eat chips. And in Spain, actually, they do eat chips, but they actually make them right there in the restaurant and you can buy them fresh. But the point there is that processed foods are totally killing us. And I don't mean to be all, alarmist, but the processed foods are really the problem. And that is what I talk about at length with my clients. Again, it doesn't mean that I don't eat processed foods. I certainly do eat processed foods. I just limit them. I avoid them and I limit them. And I highly recommend that you do too. It's not processed typically if you go to the grocery store and you shop the periphery of the grocery store, but pretty much anything in those middle aisles is going to be highly processed. So you can learn lots more of that by, like I said, reading Dr. Hyman or Michael Pollan, of course, is another great resource for really understanding the nuances of processed foods. Number 5 is also a processed food, but it's worth calling out, which is avoiding sugar. Now, again, if I'm in Italy, you better believe I am eating some gelato, but I might not eat gelato every single day. I might switch it up. I might have, one of my favorite things in Venice was fried Zabignon. And Zabignon is something it's a custard that my mom always made growing up for special occasions. And so I would certainly pick my sweets, but I'm not going to eat it just to eat it. And I'm certainly not going to skip it or miss it either. I mean, I've never seen fried Zabignon here in the United States. If you have, I would love for you to tell me about it. But you better believe when I'm in Venice, I'm going to eat that. And I'm going to have chocolate gelato, in Italy, but I just might not have it every day, or I might not have 3 freaking scoops, right? I'm just going to be mindful of that point of diminishing returns that I've been talking about in the last few episodes. And I promise you, if you do just those 3, avoid just those 3 things, fried food, processed foods, and sugar. And again, I'm not saying don't eat them. I can't say this enough because I know so many of you are going to hear me say, she said not to eat it. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying to avoid overeating it. If you just do those three things, you will feel so much better on your trip. One thing I didn't include in here that literally just popped into my head was about alcohol. If you know me, you know I love a good cocktail. I love wine. It's definitely an integral part of my life. However, we tend to overdrink on vacation as well. So overdrinking, overconsuming sugar and processed foods, and overconsuming fried foods, it's going to zap your vitality on vacation. And as I always say, vitality is actually all any of us ever really want. We want to feel good. We want to feel energetic. We want to feel alive, and we want pleasure, right? That's all we want. That's why we're on vacation, right? And so often we sabotage that vacation by overdrinking and then overeating these foods that really make us sluggish. And then we're a little grumpy and we're fighting with our family. Maybe we don't feel well. We feel bloated, and it doesn't have to be that way. By simply choosing to consume those foods consciously, intentionally, and therefore less, you can actually feel great while you're on your vacation and still get to taste all the things and, enjoy all the things. As I've mentioned on the last few episodes, I have a 30-minute training called Eating Without Fear that teaches you exactly how to eat all the things while you're on vacation without overeating them, and really how to eat all the things all the time without overeating them. So I encourage you to go and take that training before you go anywhere. And you can get that at leahpinelli.com/EWF. So I'll say that again, leahpinelli.com/EWF to learn how to eat all the things while you're on vacation without overeating them. Okay, number 6 on my list of 10 ways to eat when on vacation, 10 tips for eating while on vacation. My number 6, it actually doesn't have to do with eating. I'm going to have to change the title of this podcast. Bear with me, y'all. It's moving. So a lot of us know, especially for those people who like to travel to other countries, walking is often a big thing, especially if you're going on a European vacation. But you can get so much exercise just by skipping the metro, skipping the cab or the Uber, whatever it is, and walking to your next destination. So walking is my all-time favorite way to get exercise while traveling, if I can. But of course, there's always the hotel gym if you're staying in a hotel, swimming in the ocean, if you're at the beach in Mexico, wherever you are, just finding ways to move your body in ways that feel like love. Number 7 is to hydrate. So hydration is, it's so important, especially if you're eating, fried foods and alcohol, and just travel in general can be very dehydrating. So making sure that you're really prioritizing water is going to keep you feeling so much better, so much more energetic. Sleep. You're like, what, Leah? Why are you talking about sleep on vacation? Well, I will tell you that sleep hygiene is, if vitality and pleasure are your goal, then your sleep hygiene still needs to be on point. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't, go out until 2:00 in the morning, watching some amazing flamenco performance in Spain and dancing the night away. It doesn't mean that you don't do that. It just means that, if you really want to feel good all the way around, make sure that you're able to still get plenty of sleep that night, or at least maybe make up for it the next night or the next day with a siesta or some kind of nap. And also make sure that you're including all of that water and those veggies and all of those things to really balance out those crazy nights and dancing until 4 a.m. Number 9 has to do with alcohol, which I already mentioned above. But one of the things that I like to tell my clients to do when traveling is, one of the best ways to not over drink, even when traveling, is by really prioritizing allowing the beverages to be elegant. Now, this is how I think about it. I use the term elegant in that something that is not elegant that I used to do all the time would be doing shots or drinking tons of beer, right? I mean, these were things that obviously in my 20s as a bartender, I did pretty much on the daily. But as an adult now, right, as a woman in her 40s with a family and a career, I do not want to be hungover on vacation. I do not want to feel crappy on vacation. I do not want to black out, that's for sure. And I want to remember my experience. I want to enjoy my experience. And for me in my life, that does include alcohol, but it includes being very intentional about alcohol. It means not drinking too quickly. It means not drinking too much. And I really want to order things that I'm going to enjoy, that might be different than anything I can get at home. Some varietal of red wine that maybe I haven't had before, or some fun cocktail, right? But I really want to be elegant about it and not be, sorority girl about it. And for me, that actually takes some forethought because I was a bartender for 10 years. I can snap right back into that, party girl mode really quickly. And then the next day is usually when I remember that I am no longer 25. So elegant cocktails. And last but not least, and this is actually the most important step here, the most important tip that I have for you is to ask yourself the question, what is the experience I want to have on this vacation? Now you have to ask yourself that question before you go. You can ponder it on the plane, you can ponder it on the drive, you can journal about it, at night before you even, take off for your vacation. I don't care when or how you ponder this question, but you need to ponder this question. And the reason why is because most likely the experience that you want to have is an experience of expansion. It's an experience of joy and pleasure. It's an experience of deep satisfaction and fulfillment and rejuvenation and rest and all these things, right? Connection, all of those wonderful feelings that you want to have when you're on vacation. And so when you really are intentional about creating the experience that you consciously want to have, what ends up happening is you will deprioritize over drinking. You will deprioritize overeating. You will prioritize pleasure, as we talked about in episode 112, increase your summer pleasure factor. You will completely change the tenor of your vacation because now you've become quite intentional about creating an experience for yourself that you'll never forget. So trust me when I say this works. This is work that I do with my clients all the time when we really drill down and get specific about what is the experience that they want to have. I do this in my own life all the time. What is the experience that I want to have? And it absolutely changes everything. It maximizes the pleasure factor and it minimizes the discomfort factor, which is all we ever want. I'll give you an example of this. Every year, my family goes on a family reunion. So with my parents and my sister and her family and my brother and his family and my family. So there's, 5 families or 4 families, but it's one family. We all go, and we used to go to Lake Tahoe, rent a big house. And now we're going to Bend, Oregon this year. But the point is that there always had to be a big kitchen that is well stocked because my family is full of not just people who like to cook, they love to cook. They are chefs. Okay. This is no joke. And my family loves to cook. And so, except for me, I'm the total black sheep for whatever reason, but it's okay because I love to eat. So it works out pretty well. But the focus of these trips used to be for me all about the food. And I think it's kind of the focus of my family members still, but all about the food, thinking all about the food. What are we going to eat? What are we going to enjoy? What are we going to drink? And when I really gave it some thought, and I used to get a little anxious about going and it being so food focused because I had other things going on in my life that I was more interested in than food. And I didn't really just want to think about food for 7 days, right? So when I really asked myself the question, what's the experience I want to have when I go to these family reunions? Food is definitely a part of it. I want to eat well, but I don't necessarily want it to be my focal point. I want to get outside. I want to hike. I want to spend time with my family. I want to move my body in the beautiful lake air. I want to read. I want to relax. I want to swim. I want to spend time in the jacuzzi. And most of all, I want to really connect with my family members. That's who I'm there for, right? I want to spend time talking with my sister-in-law and my dad. And I want to really have these conversations with people that I don't get to have every day, right? Because we don't all even live in the same state anymore. So when I thought about the experience that I wanted to have in this way, in this context, it changed the entire tenor of the experience for me in that I started showing up and lifting my gaze, I call it, which basically means for my family, it's like our gaze is always down because we're always looking at the food. We're always talking about the food. We're always talking, looking at the food, tasting the food, discussing the food. It's all food, food, food. And I realized food's a part of it, but really I'm here for the people. And so I intentionally decided to lift my gaze when the food comes out and to intentionally lift my gaze and look at the people that I'm there to connect with. And that reminds me then to talk to them, to ask them questions, to be curious, to connect. That's the experience I'm here for. And yes, I enjoyed the food, but while I was connecting, as opposed to letting the food be the focal point, I allowed the people and the relationships to be, and the environment, a beautiful Lake Tahoe as I'm going on a 10-mile hike, right? I allowed that to be the focal point, and it totally changed my vacations. And now I enjoy them so much more. So that's what I have for you guys today. 10 tips for eating on vacation. And I decided I'm going to leave the title, even though I gave you 2 tips that don't have to do with eating, sleeping and moving, but they definitely sleep and movement impacts how much you eat and how you feel when you eat. So I'm keeping it. All right, y'all. Much love. See you next time. Ciao.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at leahpinelli.com. That's LIAPINELLI.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.